Clara sat by the bay window, tracing the silver frost patterns on the glass. The old house in Maplewood, Vermont, was a haven of quiet, disturbed only by the rhythmic loss of Ethan working in his workshop downstairs. Ethan, my husband. My anchor, a man of few words but infinite reliability. His steady presence was a shield against the chaos of the world, and I loved him deeply for that. But lately, safety felt heavy, tinged with a restless ache I couldn't quite name. For weeks, I'd been living under the shadow of my sister Stella's grief. Stella, my vibrant younger sister, had just suffered a devastating breakup in Boston. Her voice, once like clear crystal, now cracked with loneliness and fear. "I can't breathe, Clara," she whispered over the phone one rainy afternoon. "The silence is a physical thing. I can't eat. I can't sleep." I listened, my own heart constricting with her pain. Stella wasn't just my sister. She was the missing piece of my earliest memories, my mirror in the world. Our bond was absolute. That night, after she hung up, I turned to Ethan. He was by the hearth, reading a heavy volume on civil engineering, his glasses resting low on his nose. He looked so complete, so self-contained. I hesitated, the unusual request heavy on my tongue. "Ethan," I began, my voice barely audible above the crackle of the oak logs. "What if Stella stayed here with us? Just for a while, until she heals." He lowered the book, marking his place with a finger, and looked at me. His eyes were the deep, calm gray of a winter lake. He was not a man to rush a thought. I waited, heart pounding. Inviting Stella meant fracturing the precise rhythm of our lives, the quiet routine I'd built with Ethan, yet I knew he would grant my wish. He always did, not out of weakness, but out of a loyalty that was both comforting and sometimes strangely unnerving. Finally he nodded, his gaze steady. "If that's what your heart needs, Clara, then she should come." Relief flooded me, immediately followed by a wave of cold nervousness. His compliance gave me the freedom to act, but it also placed the full weight of the consequences squarely on my shoulders. I reached for his hand, grateful, yet fundamentally unsettled. Part 2, the geometry of 3. The next morning, Stella accepted, her voice thick with relief. I prepared the house, cleaning the carriage room, stocking the pantry. Ethan moved to the house like a ghost, helping with silent efficiency. His assistance was steady, but his thoughts were sealed away behind that quiet facade. On Friday, Stella arrived. The tires crunched on the gravel, and I rushed to the porch. She was thinner, paler, but the faint, familiar sparkle was still in her eyes. The hug was long, a desperate reconnection. Ethan appeared instantly, taking her worn luggage. His politeness was effortless, but I noticed a slight, almost imperceptible tension in the line of his shoulders. Later, over a quiet dinner, the geometry of 3 was established. I sat between them, a fragile bridge between the earth, Ethan, and the wind, Stella. Ethan was attentive but reserved. Stella was grateful but fragile. I kept the conversation light, desperately trying to keep the mood gentle, but the air felt charged. Humming with an energy I couldn't contain. The following weeks were steady in small, unsettling moments. Stella slowly bloomed. Her laughter returned, bright and bell-like, filling corners of the house that had only known Ethan's quiet murmur. I watched her spirit return, and I was joyful. Yet a knot of unease began to tighten in my chest. I started noticing the details. The way Ethan, without being asked, would leave Stella's specific ceramic mug, the one with the chipped rim by the coffee machine. The way Stella's laughter would soften, becoming more intimate when Ethan entered the room. Their interactions were perfectly innocent, centered on household tasks, Ethan fixing a loose railing, Stella helping him stack the heavy winter firewood. I, a landscape photographer by trade, usually saw the world in composition, balance, and light. Now, my own home felt like a flawed photograph, perfectly composed but with a distorted focal point. One chilly afternoon, I watched from the hallway as they worked on a broken kitchen light fixture. Ethan held the ladder, his large hands steady on the rungs. Stella, high above, tightened the screws. Their heads were close, their voices low, talking about the precision of the wiring. Their teamwork was natural, their synergy undeniable. I felt my breath catch, the artist in me recoiling from the sudden, unsettling balance they had achieved without me. I tried to tell myself it was simple admiration. Stella leaned on Ethan's strength, and Ethan, ever the rescuer, found a quiet satisfaction in mending her spirit. But every time my gaze lingered, I felt my heart race, a storm rising in my chest. I wanted to run to Ethan to remind him with a touch that I was his center. But Stella's presence always seemed to shift the moment, the words dying on my tongue. Loyalty carried a price, and that price was silence and distance between me and my husband. Part 3. The Broken. Composition, the silent tension deepened into late autumn. The three of us settled into a routine that felt both comforting and profoundly dangerous. I lay awake at night beside Ethan, listening to his steady breathing, remembering the way Stella's eyes had lingered when he spoke about his childhood. The emotional layers became suffocating. Love, gratitude, jealousy, and fear swirled into an unbearable mixture. One afternoon, seeking solitude and perspective, I went to my dark room. I was trying to print a series of photographs from the summer shots of Ethan and me by the lake. But every time I dipped the paper into the developer, the image came out wrong. Ethan's face was blurred, or my own was cast in shadow. It was a perfect artistic metaphor for my life. I was startled by the sound of muffled voices in the adjoining laundry room. It was only separated by a thin door. I can't pretend, Ethan. It was Stella's voice, low and strained. My hand froze above the chemicals. I leaned closer to the door, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. It's not fair to her, Stella continued, her voice trembling slightly. Clara is doing everything to save me, and all I do is... I look at you, and I feel healed, but for the wrong reasons. My blood turned to ice. The wrong reasons. Ethan's reply was a gravelly whisper, rougher than his usual tone. I know, Stella, but there's a line. I swore an oath to Clara. I made a promise, and I will not break it unless ... Does not have an absolute. Unless she asks you to? Stella finished, the quiet question hanging in the air. Unless she can't live with the silence, Ethan murmured. I agreed to help her sister. I agreed to be here. I agreed to her choice. But my loyalty is the only thing left holding this together, and it's tearing me apart too. I won't move first. I stumbled back, knocking a developing tray onto the floor. The sour smell of the fixer filled the air, mingling with the stench of betrayal. It wasn't physical infidelity. It was worse. It was an emotional usurpation, a silent, mutual recognition of a bond that excluded me completely. They hadn't crossed the line because of Ethan's rigid honor, but the line was there, drawn taut between them. Waiting only for my consent to snap, I spent the rest of the evening in the dark room, cleaning the chemicals, my mind numb. Ethan was obeying me. He was loyal, but he was deeply and mutually in love with my sister. My heart's desire bringing Stella home to heal had broken the very thing I sought to protect. Part 4. The inevitable choice. That night, I lay awake. Ethan came to bed quietly and did not touch me. The silence was no longer comfortable. It was a vast, echoing cave. I realized the profound truth. He was waiting for me to make the final move, to release him from his unwanted obedience. The next morning, I gathered them both in the sunroom. The light, usually so joyful, felt harsh and unforgiving. I looked at Stella, whose face was pale with apprehension. Then I looked at Ethan, whose gaze was steady, prepared for the inevitable. I overheard your conversation yesterday, I began, my voice clear and steady, devoid of the tears I felt inside. In the laundry room, I know. I know how you feel about each other. Stella gasped, burying her face in her hands. Ethan remained motionless. I brought you here, Stella, to save you, I continued, addressing my sister. And you have healed. But your healing came at the expense of my marriage. You fell in love with my husband, and I paused, turning to Ethan. He fell in love with your vibrant return. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and heavy. Clara, I swear I never initiated anything. I would never betray you. But I can't deny the connection that grew here. I am lost, Clara. I followed your heart, but I need you to tell me where your heart rests now. I looked at my two most important people, one bound by my request, the other bound by her guilt. I saw the triangle I had created, and I finally understood that love, to survive, cannot be forced into a geometry of 3. My heart, I said, rising slowly. My heart rests outside this house. I built this home to keep the chaos out, but I invited the chaos in. And now I can't live in the middle of this silence anymore. I looked at Ethan. You are free, Ethan. I release you from your oath. I cannot live with a man who loves someone else, even if he remains loyal. I need a love that is given freely, not out of duty. I turned to Stella. You are also free, Stella. You needed healing, and you found it. But you cannot stay here. You need to return to your own life and find your own center. 2 weeks later, the house was silent again. Stella had left for Boston, taking only her healed spirit. Ethan moved out the following day, agreeing to a quiet, immediate separation. He took only his engineering books and his tools. The breakup was gentle, a sad acknowledgement of a promise that could no longer be kept. I stayed in Maplewood alone. It was the solitude I needed, not the comforting silence of routine, but the raw, wide-open silence of possibility. I sold the house, the site of the fracture, and bought a small, historic cabin further north, surrounded by deep woods and a frozen, silent lake. I returned to my art, not photographing landscapes, but focusing on still life, light, shadow, and self-portraits. My work changed. It became stronger, sharper, devoid of the soft focus of dependence. I reclaimed my own frame. I heard from Stella a year later. She was thriving, running her own design studio, fiercely independent. She was dating, cautious but happy. She sent a short note. Thank you for saving me, Clara, and thank you for freeing me. I finally see the difference. Ethan eventually found his way back to Stella. They built a quiet life together, often sending me cards from their shared home. It hurt, yes, a dull, familiar ache, but it no longer defined me. The pain had become a scar, not an open wound. I realized I didn't need an anchor. I needed my own sails. And in the quiet cabin by the lake, surrounded by my own work images of light and true clarity, I found a peace that Ethan's loyalty, or Stella's vibrant presence, could never have given me. I had created a new geometry, a perfect circle, with only myself at the center dot. The move to the isolated cabin felt like stepping into an empty canvas. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of wind in the pines. For the first 2 years, I didn't seek company. I sought clarity. I needed the raw solitude to process not just the loss of Ethan, but the loss of the predictable identity I had built around him. My photography shifted entirely. I stopped chasing the expansive, blurred beauty of the Vermont landscape and focused inward. I created a new collection I called Fixer and Developer. It was a brutally honest series of self-portraits and macro shots focusing on sharp light, deep shadow, and the imperfect texture of ordinary objects, a cracked ceramic mug, a splintered piece of oak, the intricate, brittle frost patterns on the glass. This collection, born of my emotional turmoil, was my most successful yet. Critics praised its unflinching honesty and crisp, almost painful clarity. The irony was delicious. The loss of my love life had fueled the birth of my professional identity. 5 years after I left Maplewood, I was hosting my first solo gallery show in Boston. Stella showed up unexpectedly. She stood in front of a piece titled The Line, a photograph of a single, razor-sharp seam between dark and light. "It's breathtaking, Clara," she murmured, tears welling in her eyes. "You found the edge of the world and you captured it." We talked for the first time without the mediating presence of Ethan or the crushing weight of guilt. She was happy, settled, truly thriving with Ethan. They spoke of me with profound respect, acknowledging that I had been the catalyst for both their happiness and their freedom. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," I admitted. "But the most honest," Stella replied, placing a hand on my arm. "You taught us that loyalty without truth is just a beautiful prison." That night, I saw them together, Ethan, still quiet, still steady, but now with a lightness in his eyes I had never witnessed. Standing beside the vibrant, joyous Stella, I realized the dull ache was completely gone. The scar had faded to white. I felt a pure, untainted happiness for them both. I was no longer the anchor nor the fragile wind. I was the frame itself, strong and capable of containing any story I chose to create. I had created a masterpiece from my own broken composition.